Today we're going to go to a small, unassuming town where everybody knows your name, and maybe your darkest secrets too. Welcome to Circleville, Ohio, where in the late 1970s, the unthinkable began. These mysterious, untraceable letters would show up in your mailbox. Letters that knew too much, whispered too darkly, and threatened too personally. We're about to peel back the layers of the Circleville Letters mystery, where every envelope holds a new fear. Let's recap. Mary Gillespie is a school bus driver. She's living that sweet small-town life with Ron, her high school sweetheart turned husband, and their 2 kids. Picture perfect, right? Not quite. The writer's got a different story to tell. According to this mystery mail dropper, Mary's been sneaking around with Gordon Massey, the married superintendent of the Circleville schools. Picture Mary on a regular morning in 1977, strolling out to her mailbox, probably thinking about her day ahead, but what does she find? This letter, and it's about to turn her whole world upside down.
Mrs. Gillespie, stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified, and everything will be over soon.
Now, Mary's not the only one getting letters about stuff that no one should know about. Other people in town are being accused of embezzlement, domestic violence, even murder. Is it true, or is the writer just trying to scare people? Circleville isn't usually a very scary place. It's a sleepy little town about 30 miles from its big city neighbor, Columbus, Ohio. Before this, Circleville's biggest claim to fame was the annual pumpkin show. In the 70s, the town was home to nearly 12,000 people, one of whom is the infamous writer. And whoever it is, they sure seem to have a bone to pick with Mary. The next letter is addressed to her husband, Ron.
Mr. Gillespie, your wife is seeing Gordon Massey. You should catch them together and kill them both. He doesn't deserve to live.
Mary denies everything, and she and Ron decide that the best thing to do is to ignore the letters. Whoever's sending them will eventually get bored and stop, won't they? No, they did not. They got more aggressive.
Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out.
Just like they promised, the writer took it up a notch, plastering signs all over Mary's bus route. They were screaming in big, bold letters that Mary was a cheater and Ron was too chicken to do anything about it. And as if that wasn't enough, they threw in a nasty accusation about Superintendent Massey sexually assaulting the Gillespie's 12-year-old daughter. Now, things got so wild, Ron started setting his alarm for the crack of dawn just so he could yank those nasty signs down before the kids spotted them on their way to school. I mean, no parent wants their morning coffee with a side of scandal, especially not served up for their kids to see. They needed to shut this down once and for all. But Mary has a hunch about who it might be. David Longberry, another school bus driver, tried to put the moves on her a few years back and she wasn't having it, so maybe he's still sour about that rejection. So Mary and Ron rope in Ron's sister Karen and her husband Paul Freshour to join their mini detective squad. Their plan is to hit David with a no-nonsense letter of their own. Basically, like, knock it off, buddy, but, meaner. And would you believe it? The letter seems to do the trick. The harassment stops and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. But it's not over, because soon the writer ups the ante. Friday, August 19th, 1977, Mary and her sister are taking a little weekend trip to Florida, just, get away from it all. But it's what happens back home that changes everything. Nobody knows who called Ron at the house late that night or what they said. All we know is what happened after. He grabs his pistol and he jumps in his truck, yelling to his daughter he's off to have it out with the Circleville writer once and for all. But here's where things go sideways. Ron ends up wrapping his truck around a tree not far from his house. He doesn't survive it. And when the cops show up, they find something strange. Ron's pistol is under his body. A single shot has been fired, but nobody heard the shot. Police couldn't offer a reasonable explanation for why the gun went off. I mean, maybe it misfired in the crash, or could Ron have fired at the writer before he hit that tree? Paul Freshour pushed the sheriff to treat the accident as foul play, and for a while, the sheriff did just that. Even allegedly polygraphed David Longberry, the rejected suitor. But when the coroner revealed Ron's blood alcohol level was almost twice the legal limit when the accident happened, well, that just changed everything. It's ruled an accident due to drunk driving. The weird thing about that, People say Ron wasn't a drinker, barely touched the stuff. Still, case closed, and the letters start up again. The new letters accuse the sheriff of covering up Ron's death. The man is campaigning for the top spot at the National Sheriff's Association. So imagine the bad press, having this nutjob letter writer going all Zodiac killer in his backyard while he's out shaking hands and kissing babies in an election year. Talk about a PR nightmare. But more letters accuse the coroner of sexually abusing kids, and you'll never guess. This letter writer actually knows a thing or two, because years later, that coroner would lose his medical license after his victims came forward saying, yes, he'd done things to them. And yeah, after Ron's death, I see where you're headed. It's true. Mary Gillespie admitted she was seeing Superintendent Massey. She claims the affair started after the first letter. The Circleville writer is like a beat reporter who knows everyone's dirty secrets. And over the next 6 years, hundreds more letters show up in mailboxes all over town. Families are torn apart. People lose their jobs, their friends. The town rumor mill is going crazy, and things are about to get deadlier. In December of 1982, Mary gets a Christmas card with a very special message written on the back.
Just tell your daughter we are going to post some signs about her next year at the bus stops, since you've caused this by what you've done to Mrs. Massey, and all knows it. How will you face her? But your type have no consciences, or you wouldn't have hurt Mrs. Massey behind her back.
A couple months later, on the afternoon of February 7th, 1983, Mary's driving her empty bus to pick the kids up from school. She arrives at an intersection that she passes every day, only this time there's something different. A handmade sign is stuck to the fence with an obscene message about Mary's daughter. Well, she's not just gonna ignore that. So she pulls off the road and she walks over to tear the sign down. That's when she sees it. The sign seems to be tied to a box rigged with twine. Well, Mary just ends up taking it all off the fence. The sign, the box with it, everything. When she opens it, she finds a gun ready to fire. It's a trap, an honest-to-God booby trap. Mary was lucky the gun didn't go off. So now police have their first clue into the mysterious Circleville writer. They trace the partially scratched off serial number to Paul Freshour, Mary's brother-in-law. Until then, the Freshours and Gillespies have been the closest of friends, so why would Paul send these sick letters? Why would he want to kill Mary? Well, by this time, Paul and his wife Karen are in the middle of a messy divorce. She's lost custody of the kids and she's living in a trailer on Mary's property. So when police show up to question Paul, Karen spills it. She says Paul always blamed Mary for Ron's death, thinking the affair with the superintendent pushed him over the edge. He hates Mary, and Karen has the letters to prove it. Or so she claims. She says she found letters matching the Circleville writer around their house, but she didn't keep them. So when they talk to Paul, he's very cooperative. He answers every question the police ask, and he denies writing the letters. So what about the booby trap? Well, Paul insists he had nothing to do with setting it up, that someone stole his gun a while ago. But when police give him a polygraph, Paul fails. He's arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie. At his trial, the prosecution argues the writing on the booby trap matches the writing in the letters. Two experts then say that the letters match samples of Paul's handwriting. Aside from that, there's no physical evidence connecting Paul to the case. But coincidentally, Paul did take the day off from work when Mary found the box. The box itself could have easily been stolen from the Anheuser-Busch facility where he was a manager. Except, Paul says he was having work done on his house. That's why he took the day off. Nobody ever saw him near the scene, nor is it clear when that trap was actually rigged up. In the end, the jury found Paul guilty of attempted murder. He got 7 to 25 years in prison. But stick with me because we got more. Because it's not done. It's crazy. When Paul Freshour was convicted, all in Circleville breathed a sigh of relief. The letters will finally stop. Thank the Lord, their secrets are safe in the dark where they belong. Or so they think. Paul Freshour spends 10 years in jail. In that time, more letters from the Circleville writer pop up around town. Paul even gets one in jail mocking him. It reads in part,
Freshour? Now when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of there? I told you 2 years ago when we set him up, they stay set up.
If you're in Paul's camp, you'd believe his wife Karen set him up. She's the only one who stood to gain from Paul going to prison. She'd get the house and the kids back. While in jail, Paul isn't allowed pens or paper. guards inspect all of his incoming and outgoing mail. So according to the warrant, it's 100% impossible for him to send those letters. In the early 90s, fresh eyes find new evidence that could prove Paul's innocence. Before Mary found that booby trap on the afternoon of February 7th, 1983, another bus driver went through the same intersection. 20 minutes before Mary arrived, this other driver reported seeing a large man with sort of sandy hair standing next to an El Camino. Now, Paul's not a big guy. He wouldn't call him large, and he also has dark hair, dark enough that you'd never call it sandy. At the time, Karen was dating a man who fit the description. Her brother allegedly owned an El Camino. So did Karen frame her husband as the Circleville writer? And if so, is the real writer still out there? In 1993, Unsolved Mysteries arrived in Circleville to cover the case. Before filming began, the production team got a letter claiming to be from the Circleville writer. It read,
"Forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay."
The letter isn't about to stop them, and it definitely doesn't deter Paul. He agrees to talk on the show, and he's always maintained his innocence. One FBI profiler, famous for working on the Green River Killer and the Unabomber cases, thinks the writer acted alone. They're also likely a woman. In her opinion, the writer likes to manipulate people, so when they wrote things like, "I am the boyfriend of a woman, ... they were actually showing their hand. They're a woman trying to throw people off the trail. Now, based on the word choice and grammar, the writer is likely undereducated. They like using colons instead of periods, which doesn't make any grammatical sense. But Paul has a master's degree, and he's a manager at the Anheuser-Busch facility. It stands to reason he knows the difference between a colon and a period. But when the sheriff asked him for a handwriting sample, he apparently told him to copy one of the Circleville letters, which means Paul tried to match the handwriting of the colon thing. Finally, our FBI profiler doesn't think the writer would risk exposure by setting a public booby trap. Instead, someone took advantage of the situation and used it to frame Paul. Was it Karen? Was it somebody else? We may never know, but not all experts agree. In 2022, 48 Hours enlisted a leading expert in handwriting forensics and analysis to take another look at the case, and she has a different opinion. The Circleville writer has a weird way of writing their capital G. It almost looks like a 6, and the 3's sort of look like 2's. Samples of Paul's writing from work, like totally innocent writing, those samples show that he has the same quirks. The 48 Hours expert believes that Paul, and Paul alone, yes, did write those letters. Investigators also discovered Paul's fingerprints on a dozen letters sent while he was in jail. And after he was released in 1994, the letters stopped coming. He died in 2012 at 70 years old. He spent the rest of his life fighting to prove his innocence. The question remains, who was behind these sinister letters? Was it Paul all along, his ex-wife? Someone entirely unexpected? Multiple people? Drop your theories, your hunches, even your wild guesses in the comments below. Let's talk about it.